Welcome, and thank you for joining. Today, we explore a question that lives at the edge of neuroscience and design. How do the spaces we inhabit shape the nervous system, and through it, who we become? We tend to treat learning as a matter of curriculum, effort, and will. But the brain does not learn in abstraction, it learns in a body, placed inside an environment that constantly signals safety or threat. Light, sound, density, movement, and social presence are not static choices, they are biological conditions. They either invite cognition or they defend against it. My guest today, Anna Mombiedro, has built her work at this frontier. And beyond the box, she reframes schools not as a container of education, but as neurobiological instruments. So today we ask a deeper question. What does that mean to design for the nervous system instead of designing for appearances? Anna, thank you for being here. Welcome and congratulations on Beyond the Box. It's a beautiful contribution.
Thank you so much, Nathalie.
I like to begin with this. When we talk about enriched environments, what exactly is being enriched? The space itself or the child's experience?
Okay, this is a really good question because actually, what we're enriching, it's the experience of the child through the space. Actually, the child and the teacher as well. When we talk about an enriched environment, it's not just like a nice classroom or a classroom that has like specific kind of things, but it's more that we've got a certain amount of strategies used when we design the space that have an impact on sensory aspects, motor aspects, cognitive aspects, and social emotional input as well.
Okay, so that clarifies something essential. Experience is shaped from the nervous system outward, not the other way around.
Yeah, exactly. It's actually the information we receive from the environment is what triggers everything else.
Okay, so building on that, how can architecture support cognition rather than simply hosting it?
This is again a really good question. Because there are many ways, and actually, there is no like one strategy which we can say if we say this in the space, then cognition is going to be supported. Okay, so let's start with a very clear perspective that the main thing is to reduce the friction that we've got in a space when it comes to the mental capacities of the user. So let me give you some examples. If we have good acoustics, which would be a way in which architecture can support cognition, if we've got good acoustics, then we reduce the cognitive load of the user, because the user, which can be, as I mentioned, the child learning or the teacher teaching, they don't need to invest that much energy in
Okay.
understanding what is being said, right? And this is I gave you this example with acoustic information, but we can also have it with visual information, which is very common in classrooms as well, which is what we design. Having too much visual information can actually impair or have an impact, a negative impact, in how the student processes this information. So the cognitive load can feel not as good as if we take care of the visual information. So just thinking that the space is multisensory and there are many different layers of information, sensory information, getting to the body, getting to the person, that is going to help us just support the cognitive processes of both children and teachers.
I see. So cognition becomes an embodied process, partially
Mhm.
outsourced to the environment itself.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And actually, you
Okay.
use the word embodied because it's fundamental. Because especially when they're younger, um, children, they don't have the ability to distinguish between what has to be processed and what has not to be processed. I mean, they cannot make they cannot make a difference. They can just say, okay, I'm not going to listen to this conversation because I need to focus on this other thing. But if the conversation is too interesting, they can't help it. So they're going to be like, yeah, somewhere else. So as teachers, like it's a common mistake to say, just focus on this. Don't pay attention to that. They can't.
Yeah, they can. Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, cognition becomes an embodied process.
Yeah.
From your perspective, what elements in a school environment have the strongest effect on emotional regulation?
Hmm. Well, emotional regulation is also something fundamental for students. Um, from the research we have done, there are three aspects that appear like consistently, regularly, which are sound.
Okay.
Well, sound is fundamental. Um, I would say as well, having the possibility to feel protected, so have like access to a refuge. And I think the other one that has appeared a lot as well is the amount of people in a space, like the crowd. Especially when we've got like students who are inside of the autistic spectrum, these three parameters, they can compromise a lot with how their learning and well-being is developed, because if it's really noisy, if there are like a lot of different sounds simultaneously, it's impossible to regulate emotionally. Same thing with a lot of people. When a student is in a crowd, they tend to mimic other people's behaviors. Well, you know about this as well. So it's difficult for them to regulate as well. And um if the student or the teacher, because I like talking about both users, if they don't have a place where they know I can regulate there, I can go there and find myself and find my inner peace and breathe and relax and do my thing, then if they're not given this chance, then they're not going to regulate. So I think these three aspects, they should be taken into account, not only in the classroom, but also in corridors or in the playground, so whenever they're needed, they can have access to them. Yeah.
So that makes a lot of sense. I mean, regulation is spatial before it is behavioral.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, 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 absolutely.
In everyday reality, Anna, how do emotions, space, and learning interact?
Well, the interaction between emotions, space, and learning, they're actually intertwined in the nervous system itself. Um, when when we are feeling, well, when we're in survival mode, you're probably familiar with the fight or flight
Response.
system of the nervous system, right? So if we're feeling that something bad is happening and we are in fight mode, right? The nervous system is in alert mode. It's extremely difficult to learn. That's why you asked before for the regulation. So in that case, when a person is feeling like this, regulation is crucial to calm down, and then learning is more able to happen. We're more likely to remember something when we are not feeling threatened, when we're not feeling harmed by the environment.
Right.
That's why in the book we just published, in Beyond the Box, we talk about learning, but the book is actually about well-being, because when you're feeling well, when you're feeling welcome, then learning is likely to happen. Yeah.
Right. So when the body anticipates threat, learning stops, even if the child looks fine.
Yeah, because sometimes we cannot see it. I mean, this is how the amygdala works as well. So amygdala starts working, and then we're alert, and then insula stops working a little bit because we need to pay attention, and then the student can look fine Although if you pay attention, you may see some things in his or her body, like maybe the fists are close, or the body's a little bit stiff, or the way he or she is looking at the things, like he's suspicious, then no information is going to be welcome in that brain. Yeah. um which is actually some educational systems, they punish students who don't behave in a specific way, and then learning is ruined in there.
Yeah,
Because when true learning happens is when the student can feel welcome and can feel that he or she can do anything. And there are many experiments that have been done with children of different ages, like, and there is a bias as well that talks about this. If you tell a child that he or she is capable of doing it, they will do it. Even if they're not, they will eventually become able to achieve that, and
absolutely.
which I think is wonderful. And it's actually the nervous system feeling confident. So learning is about confidence, and the environment can boost this confidence, you know.
Okay, so what we call, I mean, I understand what we call disruption is the body negotiating hostile environment.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Actually,
it
this
could be
is,
like hostile environment.
yeah, you're so great, Natalie, because you go straight to the point. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because actually, when we see a child that is disruptive, because misbehaving, we would say, right?
Mm.
There, like I would say, like 99% of the scenarios in the classrooms is because, depending on their age, of course, maybe they're too warm, or they're hungry, or they're upset, or something that they didn't like just happened. Someone said something that hurt their feelings. So they're reacting against the environment, you know. Something is too shiny, or too loud, or too warm, too cold, too hungry, too something is not in balance, so they get out of this regulation and
Right.
then they have to be disruptive. Yeah.
Right. Anna, in Beyond the Box, what insights about space and behavior stood out to you the most?
mm. Well, when we wrote the book, we had interviews with many different teachers from many places, and also from my own experiences doing research. And there was one case that
Okay.
was reported by a teacher, in which we changed the furniture of a classroom. I don't know if I've ever shared this with you before. Um,
No.
and his behavior, well, the thing is that there was a classroom, and there were two very disruptive students. Okay, they were 19 years old, and they were doing some training on how to produce things with wood, like wood furniture. And well, this two young adults, because they were young adults, they just didn't like being there. They were getting late to their classrooms, to the lessons. They would misbehave, they would disturb others, and so on. So what happened, like part of the project that we did, we had to change the furniture. Okay.
Okay.
And then, instead of having individual desks, I convinced the teachers to have bigger desks that they could be folded and stored, so they could have like an empty classroom to do certain activities that they liked doing, as part of their curriculum. So what happened was that these two disruptive students changed their behavior completely, because they no one told them this, but they took the role of being in charge of setting up the classroom. So they would get, even before the lesson starts, to get the tables ready, so the classroom was set up when the other students would come. They would
Okay.
even ask the teacher, how do we have to set up the classroom? So we're going to do this and that. And then the teacher reported this to me, because this was not part of the impact we expected as part of the transformation of the classroom. And he was like, Anna, you're not going to believe this. These two guys who didn't like the lessons at all, and they were misbehaving, now they took this responsibility, and their behavior has changed a lot.
Wow. That's
So it's
powerful.
it's super powerful, because, especially because we didn't expect it, but this made us realize, and that's why we add this example in the book, but this made us realize how important agency is,
Okay.
how important it is to have a purpose in the classroom, in the school. So you're not there for learning, of course you're going to learn, we learn everywhere, but what do children and young adults do in the learning spaces? Just learning? No, they're going to do more things. They need to have a meaning, a purpose. And this was a great example, I think. So this is, in my opinion and from my experience, this has been, the most impactful thing I've ever seen in human behavior, just because of a few tables.
Yeah, I told you that's powerful. And that makes me think that when the nervous system becomes the metric,
Mhm.
like aesthetics turn into coherence.
Yeah, because in this case, we didn't measure what happened with the nervous system of these students. But as you asked before, right? Probably they were feeling better. They were feeling calmer. So they had no reason to misbehave or
Yeah,
to be disruptive. Hmm.
yeah. Anna,
Yeah.
when schools say they are investing in well-being, how can they understand whether they are truly doing so?
This is something we have to think about, because especially in the Gulf area, like, so many schools are being built, so many new schools. And there is like this kind of competition to see which one is more flashy or bigger or shinier materials, or, with a bigger swimming pool, bigger pitch to play sports, or laboratory. And okay, which is good. I mean, we need facilities. In
Yeah.
order to learn, we need good facilities. But we now, with neuroarchitecture and with environmental psychology as well, we've got many different ways to measure the impact that the space has on the student and the teacher. Sometimes things as easy as running a test, you
Okay.
know, can help us understand how the people are feeling in the space. So then that's why we created the enriched environment model, because we've got these parameters in the model that help us keep track of what scientific literature is being used to design the space. And then in this, first we do this, we implement these quality factors when designing the space. But then also, it doesn't stop here. We need to keep on and then evaluate how the space is perceived by the students and teachers. And ideally, I think we will see this in the near future. In schools, we should have someone paying attention and observing the user and spotting, difficulties, or what's working good and what's not working so good, to make changes in the space according to these observations. Not just the trend, because I think Pinterest is great because you have many ideas with Pinterest, but this is not just about big spaces or nice materials. We have to pay attention to the user, and I think we do have an opportunity here to merge well-being and architecture.
Okay, Anna, which aspects of learning environments are universal across cultures and which adapt to local contexts?
So in the enriched environment model, which I'll share it to you afterwards if you want to share it with your audience, we do have at the beginning, we do have the sensory cues, the sensory aspects of the space. Then we go to cognitive and motor responses, and then we go to social emotional interaction. So sensory aspects, which are the most basic ones, are common to humans across all cultures. Then the more complex the interaction gets, and when I talk about complexity here, I mean the interaction of the person with the environment, the more complex it is, the more attributes play a role in this. So culture plays a role when it comes to social interaction. And a little bit when we talk about cognitive information as well, because of the meaning of colors, the meaning of patterns, symbols, they've got specific meaning, and this has to be taken into account. So, and now I'm trying to think of some schools. They have headquarters all around the world. So they can have a school in the UK, a school in the Emirates, and then another school in China. Okay, it's the same school, but the context is different. The population who is using the space is different. Culture plays a role in the way the school looks like. We should not have the same space everywhere around the world. Same, maybe colors are similar. There must be some identity, but
Yeah.
we need to take into account this label of the meaning, the cultural meaning, because this is actually what triggers the connection, the sense of belonging, which is it's one of our quality factors. And this sense of belonging attaches the user to the space and again builds purpose. And what am I doing at school? Hmm.
Yeah, that makes again sense. I mean, the brain has universal needs, but identity shapes how we meet them.
Exactly. Yeah. And the way we connect with the information, the way we connect with others. It's similar when we talk about the hotels, when we talk about how to design a room in a hotel, having the same setup and
Yeah,
the exact same design for hotels all around the world is actually not helping the nervous system, because it may happen that eventually you don't know where you are. And you and me, we both travel a lot, and we know how good it feels when you're in a hotel and it's got the identity of the place. It makes you feel
right,
like you belong to the culture for the days that you're there. And it's actually a way to welcome the user. And again, this is interior design and this is architecture. So
right.
this is an opportunity we've got. Mhm.
So, Anna, going back to the schools, why are transitional spaces so important in regulating children's emotions?
Mm. So, especially before humans are under 12 years old, that
Yeah,
their prefrontal cortex is not as developed, um, changing from one atmosphere to another without a threshold can actually break how the body is behaving. It can have a very negative impact. So, having these thresholds, having this like gradient scenarios in which the body can adapt to what's going to happen next, again boosts this sense of well-being. And also, if we talk about school design, like imagine, like from very basic, you've got playground, corridor, classroom, and just a door between each one of the spaces. This is a very poor experience. At the beginning you asked me, what do we refer to when we talk about enriched environment? Are we enriching the space? Are we enriching the child? So we're enriching the experience. We
yeah,
don't go from the playground to the corridor to the classroom, but we've got breakout spaces. We have this thresholds between the corridor and the classroom. We can find these areas where the children can gather, and actually informal learning happens there. And that informal learning that happens in this part in between these two spaces is super powerful, because then their body understands that learning goes beyond the school gates. It's actually what happens everywhere. Mhm. Because otherwise they're going to say, okay, so this is the playground, I gotta perform like this, my body is in this mode, and then corridor just running or moving this way, and that's it, nothing else. And then classroom sitting, and the world is not like that.
uh,
You may need to gather and have an informal meeting in a corridor, and you got to learn how to do that as well without disturbing others and so on. So this is what an enriched environment is about.
I
Mhm.
understand the nervous system doesn't reset in the classroom, it resets on the corridors
In between.
in between, in the spaces in between, and children don't just move through corridors, they carry what those corridors make them feel.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And actually, corridors are also hotspots in many schools because they tend to be really noisy. Reverberation is sometimes
Boring.
higher than it should be. Yeah. So there is a the body is all the time trying to regulate because we're alive, so those parts in between spaces is where it has the opportunity to get ready for what's coming next. Hmm.
Anna, how can design help children feel safe, focused, and calm? That's a
Especially with sensory cues.
yeah,
Yeah, again, acoustics play a crucial role in this. Air quality as well, although it's something that we cannot see, but it is there, and the sense that we use, different smells that are, and scents that are in the space, they can help you feel better. And there is research about this as well, how lavender, for instance,
yeah.
yeah, because it's got a specific molecule that actually fights stress. Mhm. So the contact with nature is always the answer to many of our questions when we talk about implementing neuroscience research into practice. And I think this is the case in which we could say nature. Mhm.
Also, exactly like when the space becomes predictable, the brain also frees energy to focus.
Yes, because the brain knows what's happening next, and then the student is feeling better, feeling more confident, and then the cognitive load decreases, so they can think better. hmm But also, let me just add one
Yeah,
little thing here. I think something wonderful about the human being and the nervous system is that it can adapt,
yeah.
and it must adapt. We should not give everything done to the body, but it's good to challenge the body sometimes. So we just need to know what's the age of our student, of the user, what are his or her abilities, and then what the space needs to offer to give these challenges so they can train this focus. So because when there is a challenge, then focus happens.
That's powerful. Yes, you are so
So,
right. So
mhm.
if you could, if you could redesign one element in most schools, where would you start and why?
If I could design just one single element,
Yeah, one element.
well, maybe because I just published a paper about psychoacoustics. I don't
Yeah,
know, but I'm very concerned
acoustic.
about acoustics. Yeah, so it's not redesigning the corridor or the classroom. Well, maybe if I had to decide, I will go for the canteens where
Okay.
students have lunch, where acoustic actually plays a huge role. Um, but if I had to take something into account, would be acoustics, which is actually it's something that has an immediate impact, and it's very easy to measure and to improve. So that would be like a quick win, the acoustics of all spaces in schools. And then if I had to choose a space, I will go for the playground, because there is where this informal learning I told you about before happens. And playgrounds, I think they're in the near future, they will be the focus of applied research. Because in the classroom, the teacher is leading and so on.
Yeah, that
But I
makes
do think we need to
sense.
do something. Yeah.
Sounds arrive first, and the body reacts before the mind does.
hmm Exactly. Yeah.
So as you bring, Anna, and this is very important, as you bring this work to Dubai, what possibilities do you see for reimagining school environments?
I think we're in a golden area here. Like we're experiencing something amazing that has never been experienced before, which is that many investors are creating schools taking science into account. And this is an opportunity to create schools that foster well-being and learning for real,
Mhm.
and that we can measure it, and that we can redefine what a school means. Schools used to look like factories, in many countries we've got very, like, you see a school, you see a building, and it's a school because the way it looks like. And I think in Dubai, since so many schools are being built, we have the chance to change this, to change the meaning of the school. And the answer is through well-being and learning. Yeah, definitely. I think because we can, thanks to the urban space that it's got as well, and also we have climate challenges in Dubai, so we can have technology and innovation playing a role on how this new definition of a building for learning is. So we're not going to follow existing models, but we're going to set new models for what a building for learning, what a school actually is and looks like. So, and I see that this is actually happening.
It's
Yeah, this
brilliant.
is not
It's
theory.
brilliant.
Yeah.
It is brilliant because I mean, I've been in Dubai, so I know Dubai doesn't need to follow a model. Like you say, it can set one, and that's really powerful, to start
Mhm.
with.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I think it's very it's the spirit of Dubai is this, let's think, let's make the best thing that we can using research, innovation, different disciplines, and we will see it. We will see the school of the future in the present. Yeah, I do see it. And then other countries will follow, I'm pretty sure. Mhm.
Okay, Anna, thank you so much for this interview today. It was really a great pleasure to have you here, and I'm sure the audience is going to enjoy this interview.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Natalie, for having me. It was wonderful to talk to you.